Oh yeah, it's warm. It's better than if it was cold.
I thought I noticed it.
So we're going to have the Vice President, Kyle. He's going to open with prayer now. Okay, go ahead.
So everyone join me. Lord, thank you for this evening. Beautiful weather outside. Everyone got here safely. We have an amazing event that we put on, and we're so thankful for your grace over us to allow us to do this. We live in a blessed country as Canada, an opportunity to gather and hear different points of view, and it's such a blessing to have Ezra here today. So Lord, as we go forward in this evening, be with us and keep us and help us to everyone just have a good time and engage. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Yeah, before we introduce the guest, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody for coming here tonight, including all of the people who have come here off campus. That's really important. These are really serious times, and we need to band together. We need to care about this country, take this country seriously, and take the country back. So this executive team kind of was put together really, really last minute this year, and I want to say thank you to all of them. We have Judy here, who is from the local EDA, and she does a lot of youth work within the area, so she does a lot of youth reach out for the Conservative EDA, and she's been a big blessing to the club, helping us out, just encouraging us and giving us a lot of reinforcement.
And this is actually one of the oldest clubs on campus, started in 1982, and Robert N. Thompson was our faculty advisor. And who is our faculty advisor now? Would you like to have him stand?
Yeah, if you can stand up now. Oh yeah, there he is, Dr. Grant Havers. If everybody can give him a hand.
We have a conservative on campus.
Yeah, we'll bring you up. We won't embarrass you.
This is my daughter's favorite teacher.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just been really great. It's been a blessing to do all of the events we've had. We had the Mark Orwa Christmas party, the local MP for Langley Aldergrove, and Kyle Rose has been a really great support in helping me out, and Amalia with Communications Director. She's been doing a lot of work, and it's a lot of help to make a lot of these things happen. We had an amazing guest from Jerusalem, Wayne Hillsden, not too long ago. That was an amazing talk in the classroom. It was one of our first big events, and it was just such a blessed event. And recently Stockwell Day, the Honorable Stockwell Day came. He spoke in this auditorium, and it was just such a treat. I'm telling you, it was such a treat. We just had such an intimate time with him, and just hearing his story, hearing his faith journey, hearing everything he's been through, it's just so inspiring. And right now,
Maybe he gets to say hello.
oh yeah, I'll let you say hello, Dr. Havers. Thanks for being here.
Hello. Well, this is really impromptu, but good to be here. Welcome to you all, and I think we're all looking forward to a great talk by Mr. Ezra Levant, hasn't just studied the freedom of speech issue, but is a real contributor to the controversy surrounding it in a good way. So very pleased that he's here, and I know we're going to have a good enlightening experience tonight. So.
Thank you, Dr. Havers. So this might be our last event. We're not sure, so we just wanted to do that introduction and talk about the club and thank everybody that supported the club. And also there are some former presidents of the club. I think Josh Brown over here. Josh Brown. Thanks, Josh. And tonight's guest, media personality, lawyer, free speech activist. He's an entrepreneurial journalist. He's the founder and media personality for the Rebel media outlet. That's the rebel.media. And he used to also have a magazine called the Western Standard that you can see here on display. And thanks to Judy for bringing that out. That's her personal collection, so no, you can't have any. And that was an amazing publication he put together from 2004 to 2007. And it got a lot of recognition. It's too bad it's not in print anymore or being produced. Just a really inspiring individual. Ezra has fought various types of attacks on liberty and free speech, and that includes censorship laws. And one of the books he wrote, called Shakedown, How Our Government is Undermining Democracy in the Name of Human Rights, was called the best Canadian political book in 25 years by the Writers' Trust. And that book was released, I think, around 2008, 2009. And that book is a must read if you get a chance to read that. And right now, for him to come all the way from Toronto, we want to support him in everything he's doing. And he has been a massive supporter of Trinity Western University, including the law program. So we want to thank him for that. And let's introduce Ezra Levant.
Well, thanks for the very friendly introduction.
Sit on the right,
Thank you
and
to
they
all of
can
you
be more
for
centered.
coming here to spend a gorgeous Friday night. I mean, I just came in from Toronto. I think I'm gonna, defect. I don't think I'm gonna go home. There's so many other things you could have been doing tonight. So to come here and listen to me talk about political ideas shows that you care about things, and I appreciate that. I was just outside, standing in front of the awning that says TWU Law.
Woo!
And it was nice to see that, but it was actually pitiful, and it made me sad. Because it's an awning. There's no law school. Because the law school has been blacklisted. Because people don't want Christians to be lawyers. That's not a theory, that's not a conspiracy theory, that's not an allegation. That is the explanation offered up. Trinity Western has submitted its curriculum to the Federation of Law Schools, or whatever it's called, and it meets the test. Trinity Western will teach contract law, and criminal law, and constitutional law, and property law, and administrative law, and agency law, and it will teach the laws as well as any other school. There is no allegation, even from the worst haters of TWU, of Trinity Western, that the legal education will be in any way subpar. None. They don't even claim that. They don't claim that any Trinity Western graduate has exhibited bigotry. They don't claim that. There are no graduates of Trinity Western Law. It does not exist yet. So it is the dictionary definition of prejudice, of prejudging every future graduate of a pre-crime, a thought crime of what? Is there some indication, some evidence, some track record of people who graduate from Trinity Western being defective in some way, defective citizens, so defective that they ought not to be given a license to practice law? Now, I'm a Jew, and my family's been in Canada since 1903, and we're glad to be here. But there was a time, I'd say that I was born here, but Jews were welcome to Canada, thank God. But there were parts of Canada that were a little bit less than welcoming of Jews. You may or may not know this, but for example, prestigious universities like McGill,
Yes.
where there were a lot of Jews,
Yes.
had a quota, a maximum quota, numerous clauses it was called, to cap the number of Jews. You don't want too many. You don't want too many Jews. And that existed until the 40s, really, the 40s and 50s. It was the same in some parts of the United States as well. And it wasn't just for law school, it was for medical school. And even Jews who had law degrees or medical degrees had trouble getting work at law firms or hospitals. It sounds hard to believe now, there's so many Jewish lawyers and doctors, but back then, there was a quota system. That's why you have Mount Sinai hospitals. It's where the Jews could go. That's why you have so many Jewish firms in law firms. I mean, now everything's integrated. How incredible that Canada would go from quotas on Jews to equality back to quotas again. And I say this as a Jew, it caused me great anger and embarrassment that a number of the benchers of the Law Society of Upper Canada who voted against Trinity Western Law School being accredited by the Law Society of Upper Canada were Jews themselves.
Shame.
And I'm not blaming their Jewishness. I'm doing the opposite. I'm saying, do you not remember 3 generations ago it were the Jews that were kept down? And how disgraceful that it was in fact a Jew, Clayton Ruby, who led the charge in Ontario to keep up Trinity Western. But it's not just the Jews. It's not just the Jews. But I think Jews have a special obligation to speak out against anti-Christian discrimination, because the Jews ought to remember how few stood up for the Jews in recent times and in past times. I think Jews have a special obligation to call out anti-Christian bigotry. And I regret that they don't always do so. There is no technical flaw with the Trinity Western application. There is none. And if you look at the legal documents, the pleadings put forward by these bigoted benchers, that's what they call the directors of these law societies, they don't even say that there's a problem with the curriculum. They say the problem is with the values in the voluntary code of conduct that students here put upon themselves, not upon others. I've read the student code of conduct here. What's the word? What is it? Covenant, thank you. It's a self-obligation. How on earth could that be a source of bigotry? And it even fails by its own logic. There are Trinity Western graduates in an undergraduate degree who go on to get a law degree at any other number of universities. They took this covenant. Are they inappropriate to be lawyers? It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And what about other, and I say again, this is a prejudging anyone based on what they believe for themselves, how they govern themselves. It's incredible how brazen it is. And I put it to you, if it were any other distinguishing characteristic, any other religion, any other race, any other sexual orientation that were to be screened out in advance, prejudged, not for any, without a hearing, without even an accusation. Normally there is a questionable act that causes a complaint, that causes a prosecution, that causes a hearing, that then has the sentence. That's sort of how the law works. But here we have the judgment first before there's even an accused. There are lawyers in Canada who have attended deeply religious law schools, Jewish law schools. There's Jewish law schools, Yeshiva University in New York, a very religious Orthodox Jewish place. I would put it to you that their code of conduct, I haven't read it, but I would imagine that it's actually similar to the Trinity Western Covenant. There are lawyers practicing law in Canada who went to Sharia compliant law schools overseas. There are lawyers in Canada who went to Brigham Young University. Why is it that Trinity Western has a bullseye on it? Well, it's obvious. Because the legal elite does not want a diversity of opinion. They're for every other sort of diversity imaginable. Every racial, religious, sexual diversity imaginable. But they cannot tolerate someone who is Christian and would actually say, I believe in this enough to bind myself and govern myself. It's not even about how someone treats other people. It's how they dare to bind themselves. It could not be more expressed. And the fact that 3 law societies in Canada have opposed this, and that the courts, the courts are mixed on this. This is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. The fact that there are some judges accepting this is terrifying in 2016. I put it to you that Christianity is the last acceptable discrimination in Canada. Being anti-Christian, being an anti-Christian bigot. At most workplaces, in most public forums, in most companies, in most media, to tell an off-color joke about feminism, about Judaism, certainly about Islam, can mean immediate sacking. But anti-Christian bigotry is the norm. It can be acute, or it can be a slow burn background. Of course, the pastor in this movie of the week is a Puritan fuddy-duddy who turns out to be a hypocrite. Of course, I mean, there is that central casting pastor, or the Christian who is preachy and moralistic and always a hypocrite, leaving. I mean, in Hollywood, that's what Christianity is in Hollywood. Compare it to Little Mosque on the Prairie. Yeah. Could you imagine Little Church on the Prairie, in which the Christian leader was treated as the hero? On the CBC, it's unthinkable. It's unimaginable. It's not just the slow burn background. Let me give you an example from Toronto. In downtown Toronto, there's a public square, a little bit like Times Square, New York. It's called Yonge and Dundas Square. It's a big square. This big billboard-style TVs. There's always a festival of some sort. There's hot dog carts around. That's why I'm there. And there's occasionally, concerts and whatnot. And I don't go there all the time, but whenever I do, I see a permanent kiosk just on the street. It's a table, really, giving away Muslim Qurans. They're every day. And not just Muslim Qurans, other books on how to be a Muslim, including how and when to properly beat your wife. I know this because I've seen the books. Now, I believe in freedom of speech, and I believe in freedom of religion. I don't particularly like people preaching that it's okay to beat, to assault and batter your wife. I don't appreciate that. But that's in Yonge and Dundas Square. There's break dancers, there's buskers, and there's also a Christian pastor who does, I guess, what the Muslim kiosk does. I've seen him. He stands there with a little PA system and he preaches the Bible in his own way. And occasionally he sings in his own style. And if you don't like it, keep on walking. 10, 20 feet away, his sound will be drowned out. His name is Pastor David Lynn. His sound will be drowned out by the next guy, the next busker. But I don't know if you've seen it. He actually videoed it, which is, I wouldn't have believed him if he didn't have it on tape. I just wouldn't have believed that police came to him and said, "Turn that music off." And he said, and he was very polite, more polite than I would have been. He said, "Under what section are you telling, under what law?" It's not, no swearing, no shouting, no raising his voice. I would have gone, check, check, check. No, he was so calm. And the police couldn't tell him under what section they were shutting him down. They didn't know. They were making it up. And then a cop said to him, and this was on the video, check it out, you can find it in a second on YouTube, Reverend David Lynn. The cop said, "If you're going to ask those questions, I'm going to seize your gear. I'm going to take your loudspeaker, your PA system, because you dare to question me." On tape, unbelievable. Now, it's one thing for a policeman to issue a ticket. I mean, that's the police discretion, and I think the cops were wrong here. But then the prosecutor decides whether or not actually to take it and run with it. a sober reflection done in a legal office by a lawyer. So maybe the cop was having a bad day. Maybe he saw something or was grouchy or something, fine. But the prosecution? There's no crime in Toronto. We got all the crime down pat. So the prosecutor cleared everything else important off his desk to go after Reverend David Lynn and his busking. That's what they ended up charging him with. Preaching without a busker's license. Well, see, that's the thing in Canada under our charter rights. You don't need a license to preach. That's what they would do in Communist China. There are churches in China that are approved by the Communist Party of China. That's not a real church. In Canada, you don't need the government's permission to talk about the Bible any more than you need the government's permission to talk about the Quran and hand it out there in Yonge and Dundas Square just the same. Why was it that the police felt comfortable shutting down this preacher when 30 feet away, I mean, you could see both, they would both fit together in the width of this room. The preacher was there, the Quran kiosk was there, you could see them both in the same field of vision. They would never shut down the Quran kiosk, even though it has books prescribing how to beat your wife. What is this? How did this happen? How did anti-Christian bigotry become so normalized? Well, because over time, the culture, Hollywood, the law, our leader, a fish rots from the head down. What message does it send when the benchers of the Law Society of Upper Canada just saying those pretentious, portentous words? Oh, there's what the law. I mean, you think they're wearing wigs. We're with the Law Society of Upper Canada. No, it's called Ontario now. You can tune it down. No, when the Law Society of Upper Canada says it's okay to discriminate against Christians in advance, prejudging them, that they will be bigoted. Because you're a Christian, we know you will be bigoted against gays. Oh, is that a fact? Who's the bigot now? Who's the prejudger now? When people in high office, when the CBC with their $1.2 billion a year pumps out a steady diet of a steady drumbeat, and it's not always acute, like shutting down a pastor, it's often just snide. Whether it's Michael Enright, the CBC star, saying that the Catholic Church is the largest criminal organization since the mafia.
What?
That's what he said. You think you can get away with that talking about Islam that way? You think you can get away with that talking about Judaism that way? No, it's Christian. What are the Christians going to do? And that's the thing. I myself have discovered this difference 10 years ago now. I published in the Western Standard magazine.
Yay.
Thank you for bringing those. That's a blast from the past.
Will you autograph it for me?
I will. The Danish cartoons of the Muslim prophet Muhammad were published and caused riots overseas. This was a news story. We covered them as a news story. We showed 8 of the cartoons, not out of agreement with the cartoons. Many of them were nonsensical. They were still doodles, really. But the cartoons were the central artifact in these riots around the world. That more than 200 people died in the burning of the Danish embassy in Damascus. There were riots in Tehran. So we were a news magazine. We published the news of it. I was hit with a complaint before the Alberta Human Rights Commission for hate speech, for showing a picture of the news, as if the news itself were hate speech. The wording of the law, publishing anything, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. That's the wording of the law. For 900 days, 15 different government bureaucrats and lawyers investigated and prosecuted me. And in the end, they dropped it because they were so shamed in the national media. But during this 900-day experience, as I was essentially being prosecuted for blasphemy, Sharia law by a secular court, really, that's what else was it? I cannot show an image of Mohammed. Under what Canadian law is that possibly proscribed? But during that period, I studied the Human Rights Commission, and I read every single human rights case in Alberta and many in other jurisdictions. I just sat down and read them all. And there was one case of a Christian who was in a music store, I think it was HMV, and discovered a band that had a CD, and all the lyrics were about killing Christians. It was a shtick, I think. It was an act. It was a, I'm so shocking, aren't I? You know, I mean, it's kids. But I mean, it was grotesque, and it was macabre, and it was, the lyrics were violent, and it was like snuff music. He could not have written his lyrics in a more anti-Christian way. It was all the way. And a Christian was leafing through it and saw this and took it to the Human Rights Commission. Now, I don't believe that the government should weigh in on matters of good taste or offense. I believe we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I do not believe in the counterfeit human right not to be offended. It's not a real human right. That's a power to censor someone. I believe in the right to be offended. You can be offended. You don't have that right in every country to be offended and to express yourself. But this Christian took this, I think it was HMV. Kids these days don't even know what that is, do they? To the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Commission said, you cannot be discriminated against for religious reasons, even though it is vile and hateful, because you're Christian, therefore you cannot be discriminated against, because Christians cannot be discriminated against. So it's a little circle. Are you Christian? Yes. So you can't be discriminated against. Why? Because I just said so. That's actually rooted in our Constitution. Section 15.1 of our Charter of Rights guarantees equality for people based on race, religion, national origin. 15.1 says it, beautiful. And then 15.2 immediately says, except for programs and activities and policies designed to ameliorate conditions of disadvantage. What does that mean? Anyone who is not the dominant race, religion, or national origin can have a leg up, affirmative action. So basically, 15.2 says, if you are Christian, don't bother going to the government to complain against second-class status. Don't even bother, because Section 15.2 of our Constitution will save it every time. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot of law at you, but there's a bit of a point there, and it's this. So many of our decisions these days are made by lawyers. So many radical decisions, so many decisions that change the fabric of our society. Crazy ideas, radical ideas, transformative ideas that cannot get through the people's house, the House of Commons. Look at that word, the commoners. Oh, you're just a commoner. Yeah, now we got a whole house where all of us commoners get together. Well, you commoners, we're members of the Law Society of Upper Canada. But you see my point, is ideas that cannot muster the support of mere commoners. Well, so what? Because can you get 9 judges, or 5 out of 9 judges, appointed till age 75, unaccountable, unelected, all from the same stratum and social circles? If you can get it through the back door of the courts, you're done. And the Charter of Rights, it positively funds, the Liberals have just brought back the Court Challenges program, which literally takes tax money from the commoners, gives it to lawyers to sue the government to expand particular interpretations of the Charter of Rights. Christian lawyers are not funded to challenge the Charter, but anti-Christian lawyers, feminist lawyers, left-wing lawyers are. And so can you see why it is so important to the left, to the anti-Christian left, to people who want to shape society through the courts? Can you see why it's so important to stop Trinity Western from having a law school? Because imagine if the first year there were 20 grads, and the next year was 30, and before you knew it, 100 lawyers a year, I don't know, came from Trinity Western, And some of them would just go into contract law and real estate law, and some wouldn't even do law. But maybe once a year, out of you have 100 grads a year, maybe one of them goes on to be, I don't know, an attorney general one day. Maybe one of them goes on to be a judge who hears an important case. If you started to plant seeds of little baby lawyers to grow up into big, I know it sounds terrifying to most people, but if you, a junior lawyer today, in 20 years may be a managing partner at a law firm, may be a VP legal at a large company, may be on a high court. Can you see why it's so important to abort that before it's born?
Mm-hmm.
I'm embarrassed that it's not just the law societies that have declared war on Christian lawyers, but the media has reported this in a way that is shocking. They've flipped it on its head, as if these law societies were protectors of equality instead of engagers in bigotry. I want to tell you about a story I talked about on my show tonight that shows a little bit about this pervasive, it's a bullying. I don't like that word because that's used by the other side to shut our side up. But let me tell you a little story about PayPal. Does anyone here ever use PayPal? It's like an online bank, right? It's actually a transaction payment service. 173 million users around the world. We use it on our website. It's a bank. It's like a tech company. What's it got to do with public policy? The other day they announced they are canceling the construction of an office in North Carolina, shutting down 400 people they were going to hire because there's an anti-gay law passed in North Carolina. Right. Is it well, I'm not anti-gay. I don't believe in discriminating against anybody. Frankly, my view on that, just leave, I don't want to know about it. I think we talk about, I think things are hypersexualized these days. I'm not anti, I just want to be left alone, But if there was something really anti-gay going on in North Carolina, I would be concerned because I'm not anti-gay. I wouldn't want discrimination, is what I'm saying. I think we should all be equal before the law. And obviously it's got to be bad if PayPal is canceling 400 jobs there. And I read about this in the CBC, so it's got to be true. Well, so I looked up this law. I think it's called Bill 2. I read it. It's got nothing to do with, it's a bathroom law.
Oh my God.
And it only applies to schools and to public facilities like they're listed. Swimming pool, locker rooms, and changing rooms. Okay, so it's for kids. It has nothing to do with private offices like PayPal, or private homes, or religious institutions, or whatever. It's just, the rule is very simple. Only boys can go in the boys' bathroom. And only girls can go in the girls' bathroom. And if there is a challenging situation, there can be accommodation. They can use the teacher's bathroom, or they could use the boys' or girls' bathroom if it's sort of, if there's like a supervisor or something. Like there's a wiggle room in there, but it's in general saying you can't have guys go into the girls' change rooms.
Thank you.
Now that I read this, what PayPal's upset about? What's this got to do with PayPal? PayPal can have any kind of bathroom it wants. It can have one bathroom. It can have 3 bathrooms. You can have like an open concept, high-tech bathroom. You can pull your desk in the bathroom. And 2 things came to mind. First of all, it is not anti-gay to say boys in the boys' bathroom, girls in the girls' bathroom. If there's someone who is confused and is going through a transgender thing, again, I don't believe in being mean. I do not believe in being mean, and I know that Christians don't believe in being mean either. But PayPal said there was some destruction of human rights, and the CBC said that too. And I read the law, and it wasn't. It was actually, as a dad of girls myself, I don't want a guy going in the change room. I just don't want. So So when did that become a human right? The counterfeit human right for a man to go into the girls' change room. That ain't a real human right.
Yeah.
And that's got nothing to do with being gay. Gay men can go in the boys' room. Gay men do that all the time. Lesbian women can go in the girls' room. This got nothing, it's just, your boy got it. Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, who still has his meat and 2 veg, he can't go into the girls' change room, so he can't, not in North Carolina. But when you have lawyers and law schools and law professors and judges and courts and the Supreme Court who for years and years and years are transforming things with a particular agenda, that becomes, no, of course that's a human right. Don't you know? The CBC thinks it is. PayPal thinks it is. Now, the point I made on my show tonight was there are gay rights issues in the world. This week, the Islamic State terrorist group put out a snuff video of what they do with someone accused of homosexuality in the Islamic State. They take them up the top of a high-rise, they throw them down, and then when they're down on the ground, they stone them just in case they were still alive. There are gay rights issues in the world. PayPal operates in Saudi Arabia, a country where homosexuality is illegal. Most Muslim countries in the world, homosexuality is illegal. Some places it's punishable by death, like Iran. Other places, like United Arab Emirates, they just put you in jail. PayPal operates in all those countries. Why is it that PayPal will tolerate Islamic anti-gay, not just bigotry? Throwing a guy off at the top of a building is not prejudice or bigotry. That is actual gay bashing. That's another word that is being repurposed legally to mean verbal words. Where is the Law Society of Upper Canada? Where's the Law Society of BC talking about these real issues? You want to prove your bona fides on human rights? Why is it that Christians at a loving university like Trinity Western are the target of such a, I want to use the word jihad, but I won't use it here, a target of such a campaign, but gay rights activists and feminists are silent about what's going on, not just overseas, but that's starting to come to Canada. We're starting to see in Canada that culture of honor killings. Aqsa Parvez, a young Muslim girl family from Pakistan, didn't want to wear the hijab or the niqab, wanted to feel the sun on her face, wanted to feel like a Canadian, murdered by her brother and husband in Mississauga. The Shafia family, a husband with 2 wives, a polygamous family. A husband brought 2 wives over and 3 girls, wife number 2 and the husband murdered wife number 1 and 3 women because one of them had a secret marriage, one of them wanted to go out on a date, none of them wanted to dress in body bags. That culture of honor violence is coming to Canada, and we don't dare call it by its proper name. But we take out a magnifying glass and look at Trinity Western and say, I just know it. I just know you're bigots. I know it so knowingly that I am going to prejudge every law school graduate at Trinity Western in advance before there are even those, before there's any complaints. It is not about Trinity Western. It is about the legal cartel that is slowly extirpating any contrary views. The people who say they believe in diversity the most are the ones who will tolerate it the least. And for every kind of diversity. So what do you do? Well, I think part of it, I remember when I went through my own Human Rights Commission fight for publishing the cartoons, I thought a lot about what you do with real hate speech. There is real hate speech. People hate, it's a human emotion, always will be. If we could ban hate by passing a law, we'd have passed the Love Each Other Act a long time ago and we'd be living in utopia, but men are not angels. Hate is a human emotion. If you don't ever feel hate, there's something broken with you. We feel love, hate, contempt, respect. These are feelings we have. So what do we do in a real case where we see hate, a hateful comment? Do we call the 911 line like was done on me for publishing the cartoons. I know what you do. You hear a racist joke, you hear an anti-Semitic joke, you hear at the office you say, well, that's not how we roll here. You know, you take a personal moment to spend some of your personal capital, and by the way, that's going to have a much more salutary effect than calling the government and maybe a year later there's a hearing and there's a big thing. My point is personal. Like I thought through what do you do in the case of hate speech that's real, because people ask me, well, what should we do? There's real hurt feelings involved here. I said, well, it's okay to have hate speech. Number one, I want to know who the haters are. I want to know. Number two, I want to have a teachable moment. Hey, everybody, did you see what he just said? Let me tell you why it's wrong to be racist. Let me tell you. And number three, when we outsource to the government, policing feelings, we give up our personal responsibility as citizens to do. So if someone said to me 10 years ago, Ezra, you say you shouldn't be in court for publishing these cartoons that hurt feelings. What should we do about hurt feelings? I said, hurt feelings are okay. Tells us who the feelings hurters are. Lets us remind everyone why it's not good to hurt feelings. And finally, it's good to intervene and say, hey, that's, what you said there was wrong. So take every one of those lessons and apply it here. If someone is an anti-Christian hater, why should they not be identified as that? The Jews have the Anti-Defamation League. There's the Southern Poverty Law Center that identifies people they describe as anti-black or otherwise racist. There's the Catholic Civil Rights League, I suppose. Should we not name and shame anti-Christian bigots? Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? The crusading lawyers who are trying to get Trinity Western blackballed, why should they not be named and shamed? I'm not saying defamed, but name them and point out what they're doing. Point two, teachable moment. Hey, did you hear what they just did? He prejudged every Christian. That's wrong. That's against Section 2 of our Charter, Fundamental Freedoms. I think we should go on offense. Name them and shame them. Teachable moment. And number three, and this is something that I see sometimes in the Christian community, is people not wanting to be in the public square. People say, well, I'll just talk about it in my church or with my friends or my family. I don't want to make a big scene. So Christians who say, well, I don't want to be a public political citizen about this. I don't want to make a fuss. And I'm going to close with one more BC example because it's 8 o'clock and I want to leave some time for questions. Does anybody remember what happened in Nanaimo and Leadercast a couple years ago? Anybody seen that?
ChickfilA.
Okay, let me just give you a quick reminder for those of you who didn't know. A couple years ago, there was a conference called Leadercast. And it was actually happening, I think, in Georgia, but it was satellite broadcast around the world. So there's a leadership-themed conference with a slight Christian tinge. They're not heavy duty at all. I think Laura Bush was one of the speakers, kind of thing. Like, it's not heavy duty preaching, but a little bit of Christianity and leadership and being, I bet a lot of non-Christians went to see it too, because it was like Tony Robbins kind of be a leader stuff. So people would gather in hundreds of places across North America in a room like this, and they'd have a big screen come down, and it would be projected from Atlanta, Georgia. So around the continent, you could participate as if you were there. That's why they call it Leadercast, because it was broadcast. And so in Nanaimo, some people say, all right, let's just book a room in the convention center. No big whoop. Pay a few $100, sell some tickets. Let's do Leadercast in Nanaimo. There's some Christians in Nanaimo. Some people want to, okay, no big deal. Sign a contract with the convention center. All right. Well, a few days before that Leadercast was to happen, a city councilor in Nanaimo brought a motion to rip up the signed contract that Leadercast had with the convention center because it was a city-owned facility. So apparently this alderman thought he owned it or something and could rip up the signed contract just because apparently he was the boss. And with no notice to the Leadercast people, no invitation to them to come and present the other side, with no knowledge of what Leadercast actually was. They called it so many wrong names. They clearly didn't know what it was. They had no idea but someone said that they were anti-gay. And so they voted, I think it was 6-1 if I recall, not only to cancel and rip up the contract, tickets had already been sold, but to ban in perpetuity anyone who is or was divisive. That was the word. I remember the word. Well, divisive, eh? But, I mean, actually in politics, when you have a vote, it's often called, I call for the division, yes or no. We divide on everything every day. That's how we choose things. Who determines who's divisive? These people were dividing Christians. And they were so know-nothings. I just want to give you an example that stuck with my mind. One of the city councilors who was railing against Leadercast compared them to the Muslim terrorist group Boko Haram. I'm not kidding. They kidnapped 400 Nigerian girls, raped them, and compared them to Boko Haram, compared them to the mafia. And this know-nothing counselor, ChickfilA, the great chicken sandwich company, they were one of the advertisers on Leadercast, and that was the proof that Leadercast was anti-gay, because apparently one of the founders of ChickfilA believed in opposed same-sex. I mean, it's just so. But this alderman called it ChickfilA. Like you see, he knew so. It was just I was watching, and again, I wouldn't have believed this had I not seen the video, the Nanaimo Council video, and. No notice to the Christians, just rip up the contract. Now the next town hall meeting, a bunch of Christian leaders came because they had watched this disgraceful debate with a bunch of know-nothings outdoing each other how little they knew, but calling this Christian conference, comparing it to the mafia, comparing it to Boko Haram, and of course banning any Christian group forever from a public building. Constitution much? No. And we retained John Carpe to sue, and they buckled immediately, which shows the power of a lawyer. A bunch of pastors came in to that church the following meeting and pled in a very Christian way, and by that I mean didn't raise their voice, didn't swear, didn't get, just like Reverend Lynn in Yonge and Dundas Square, very polite, and you could see the pastors were down there, and the counselors were up here, and at least they weren't wearing wigs like lost side out here. Oh, the commoners are here. Yes, they plead, and they ignored them. And it was only when the lawyer came, John Carpe, that he put the fear of Jesus into them. And not only did they repeal that odious, bigoted law, but they actually paid compensation to Leadercast. And you may recall how the story ended. The mayor was thrown out, as was half of the city council later in the next election cycle. But what was the main point? Back to my earlier point about the normalization. If it had been a Muslim conference, a Jewish conference, a black conference, a gay conference that had been summarily ejected, contract ripped up, outrageous slanders. Oh, they're like Boko Haram. Imagine saying that about a Muslim group, right? They're like the mafia. I'd like to hear you say that about an Italian group. And then saying, we reserve the right to blacklist anyone we don't like in perpetuity. Not only would that not have happened, not only would that not have passed, I think it was 6-1, but that would have been on the national news with Peter Mansbridge that night. That would have been the front page of the Victoria Times Colonist, the Vancouver Sun, the Globe and Mail, the National Post. The New York Times would have sent someone up. Do you doubt it? The Claims magazine, the city that hate forgot. I don't know. I mean, it would have been a national scandal. But if they're just Christians, and a certain kind of Christian. I mean, the media has certain Christians that they like. Christians who have lost their saltiness. Salted lost saltiness. The media has their Rolodex of go-to Christians. You ain't on that list. Now, so what are the lessons there? Number one, look how normalized this is. Look how normalized this is. Number two, a lawyer comes, and John's a pretty polite guy. I don't know if you met him. Pretty nice guy. He doesn't swear, he doesn't growl. But a lawyer came and they knew what they were doing was wrong, and so they backed down within a week of the lawyer presenting. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about the importance of lawyers and having Christian lawyers? Do you see the importance? And do you see why the cartel wants to keep Trinity Western out? Imagine if instead of one John Carpe, and he's got a couple of friends with him, imagine if there were 10. I talk about Trinity Western grads, some would go on and just do real estate law, and that's fine because you got to buy and sell houses. But imagine if some went into, became professors. Some wrote textbooks. I said some go on the court, but imagine if you had, instead of 1 or 2 or 3 John Carpe's public interest lawyers, imagine if you had 10 or 20 across the way. Imagine if you had one in every province. Can you imagine, I mean, just fighting away, trench warfare, every day, every month, every year. You have 10 or 20 John Carpe's. You're going to change a lot of things. You're going to fight for a lot of Leadercasts and Reverend Lynns. And you're going to push back and you're going to slowly change the culture. Politics is downstream from culture. Don't expect to win an election when every other thing has been against you for 4 years. The media, the universities, pop culture, movies, lawyers, courts, NGOs, every activist. Why would you think you'll suddenly have a win on election day when for 4 years you had the drumbeat on the other side? And that's why it's so important for them to cut off the law schools, because law is where the decisions are made. It's not made by mere commoners. Don't you know that now? But the reason I went on this whole tangent was because I talked about the 3 things that you need to do. You need to name and shame, to call out the haters, the anti-Christian haters. Why don't you say that? Are you afraid to call someone a hater? Are you afraid to call someone an anti-Christian bigot? Why are you afraid? Is it because you hate being called a bigot unfairly? I know you do, and I know everyone in this room is being called a bigot unfairly, and so you don't want to use that same dagger in return. But I put it to you that it is morally appropriate to use the phrase anti-Christian bigot when you're dealing with an anti-Christian bigot. Don't use that word falsely. It's like, there are some Jews who call everything anti-Semitism. Oh, I was pulled over for speeding, anti-Semite. No, he didn't know you were Jewish. You were speeding. No, anti-Semite. No, that's not anti-Semitic. So don't throw it around. Keep that knife sharp. Don't dull it and profane it by overuse. But when there is an anti-Christian bigot, why are you afraid to say so? And why are you afraid to have a teachable moment? Kids, that's anti-Christian bigotry. By the way, let's read section 2 of our Constitution that talks about equality of religion and freedom of religion. Freedom of religion, I mean. And my third point, remember I said number 1, name and shame, call out the bigots. Number 2, teachable moment. But what was number 3? Number 3 was don't outsource your civic duty to some group. John Carpe can do things, other public interest lawyers can do things, but don't you think you have something that you can do? Even if it's a very small thing, even if it's just saying something when you hear an anti-Christian joke. Why don't you say something? Maybe one day you'll write a letter to the editor, maybe one day you'll call into a talk show, maybe you'll go and do more. But this is how I end my story. In Nanaimo, after this outrageous contract violation, after the outrageous defamation by a sitting councillor, and 6 out of 7 voting, Boko Haram, like the mafia, bigoted, perpetual restraining order, really. No Christian can use public facility. Christians can pay taxes for it. Oh yeah, there is a use for Christians in Nanaimo. You can pay taxes for the convention center. You just can't do anything there because you're divisive, you see. But the Christians went in, and I saw the video. Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but will you please stop calling me Boko Haram? Thanks very much. And then when it was all over, I remember we had a celebration barbecue in Nanaimo. I don't know if anyone was here. We had about 800 people there. Not one church came, not one pastor came. Some came from the mainland. That impressed me. And I was curious. I had a great Margot, I forgot her last name, maybe some of you guys are 10 kids. She helped me organize. What a great, we fought back so hard. I said, Margot, where's all the churches? Well, Ezra, this was too rough. You're too rough. They don't like the word anti-Christian bigot. Tell you what, folks, I mean, I know you want to be polite, I know you want to be Christian, and I know you want to turn the other cheek, and I know you want to be like Jesus, but every once in a while, he used a hammer and he broke a table. Every once in a while. And I do not know the New Testament well enough to start quoting from it. That's not my book. I'm the old. I'm more God of thunder and lightning than God of love. But I love my neighbor. Well, that's a Jewish thing too, I guess. But every once in a while, I think it behooves people who want to have a place for Christians in the public square to fight. And you don't have to swear, you don't have to be mean, but you have to fight every once in a while. Because I put it to you that it is easier to fight in the first ditch than in the last ditch. And we are not yet in the last ditch. But if, God forbid, Trinity Western is blackballed by anti-Christian bigots who do not hide their motivations, that is too far. That is too far to go before you fight. And I think that not everyone is conflict oriented. And you don't have to be mean. But you have to stand up for yourself. Because I fear that if you do not stand up for yourself, these days not enough people will stand up for you. I've spoken for about an hour, so I'll stop now. I'd love to take your questions and comments, but let me close by saying it's a pleasure to be here in Trinity Western. It was nice to be invited. I flew here and I'm flying right back for a reason. I guess part of it's because I talk about you so much. I thought, I may as well come and say hi to you in person. I actually really don't know a lot of people from Trinity Western in my life. I probably actually don't know anybody. I don't have any friends from Trinity Western.
We'll be your friends.
Thank you. It's just where I am and where I live and who I engage with. This does not affect me personally in any way. But I believe, even though I'm out in Toronto, in a neighborhood I call Jutopia, I believe that if Trinity Western loses, and by lose I mean either loses in court or loses its own spirit and motivation and decides to throw in the towel, I believe that if all Trinity Western ever gets, if the closest it ever gets to a law school is that pitiful, sad awning, if that's as close as you ever get to a law school, then even though I don't know anyone from Trinity Western other than who I've met here today, I will have lost something. I will have lost something as a Canadian who remembers my grandfather's generation not being allowed to go to med school or law school, and remembers the numerous clauses, and remembers the quotas, and the bigotry, and Jews not allowed to join this club and that club. And I will see that Canada's promise of equality before the law and the fundamental freedom of religion, I will see it eroded. And so it is my fight, even though I don't know any of you until tonight. And so I wish that you will find resolve and strength to fight in whatever way you can. And I think it starts with simply speaking the truth, calling out anti-Christian bigots when you see them, turning them into teachable moments about why Christians have the right to be in the public square, and finally engaging in small acts of citizenship, small acts of engaging in the public and saying that just like Jews and Sikhs and Muslims and Hindus and gays and blacks and Aboriginal people and anyone else, you have equal rights as anyone in this country. Thank you for your time.